Well, I got good news if you're a BKFC fan. Conor McGregor has now purchased this particular company. And not only that, I think he's also using it as a leverage tool to sort of have him re-sign with the UFC. I know you guys have seen my video a few days ago regarding Conor McGregor's current signing with the UFC, right? Or the lack of. And the reason being is because they don't believe that he is going to be a formidable future contender or a title holder, or for that matter, somebody that they can look at and say is going to be the future of, let's say, the 155 division or the 170 division. In fact, a lot of those years have been long gone. Forget about 145 in terms of talking about getting in there with the likes of Ilia Topuria or even any top 155er at all. Those days are gone. But one thing we can really count on Conor McGregor is that he is a savvy businessman. And the fact that he is that savvy businessman, he had decided to invest in BKFC. Now, here's the thing about Conor McGregor, right? And here's something you got to understand. Okay, so the video, I was just looking down on my phone right here. This is the video that you guys should take a look at right here. Conor McGregor not being signed, not re-signed by the UFC, and Conor's final 2 fights that are left in his contract, which is, again, honestly, a big part of this whole entire story with BKFC. So has Conor made great business decisions with, let's say, Proper 12 liquor? 100%. It obviously made a big factor into his business portfolio. Obviously, as a Muslim, that's not the type of business we would ever get in. But rest assured, there's problems that came along with him trying to build that business. And it was in the cost of not the burdens of monetary or financial means, but rather the burden of losing a longtime friend and a loyalist in Artem Lobov, because of the fact that Artem Lobov had said something to the effect that, well, I had given you an idea of this particular contract or this particular business plan to put in contracts with El-Kheer, who still is the CEO and president of Paradigm Sports, the management company that runs Conor McGregor's whole entire career. So he said to Conor, man, I don't want any money out of this. And of course, Conor took it literally. Of course, after a tough career in the world of combat sports, UFC, regional MMA, and then on top of that, doing bare knuckle fighting in Russia and in BKFC, by the way, the company that now Conor McGregor owns. And by the way, I saw a little funny meme about it where Conor just bought the BKFC so they could fire Artem Lobov. I don't even know if Artem is even an active member or a roster member of BKFC, but nonetheless, one thing we can count on with this whole entire fiasco is that he lost a friend, okay, in Artem, but at the same time, he continued on with all the business ventures that he had going on, which, by the way, adds on to this particular portfolio of now owning a stake of BKFC. We've seen Dana White with David Feldman, and by the way, I'm going to get to him in a little bit, right? A little bit of some of his, I guess, promotional malpractice and what have you. But we've seen a video or a photo op of Dana White and David Feldman. Now, we don't know what all that is about. We don't really understand or know what is behind that particular photo or what was the purpose of that whole entire meeting, or if it was a meeting or if it was just 2 guys that were both promoters in the same fight industry that just wanted to get together and talk about anything other than fighting. All of these are great possibilities. But one thing we know for sure is a for sure possibility right now is that Conor McGregor is an owner of BKFC. And David Feldman, I think, really hit the jackpot on this one. Far more than Conor McGregor was to hit the jackpot if he was to just sign with BKFC. I'm going to explain what I mean by this. Well, for one, let me get to one of the promotional malpractices of David Feldman that I was going to explain to you about. When BKFC first started a few years back, when they first started their first show, all the way to their second show, their next pay-per-view, and then all the way to the era of where now they're creating Knuckle Mania events, which is what they had this weekend with Mike Perry and Thiago Alves. And also in the co-main event, obviously you had the heavyweight Mick Terrell taking on Lorenzo Hunt. And Lorenzo Hunt was on his way to becoming a 3-weight world champion. So it's great. They sort of follow these formats from the UFC, and shamelessly so they do it. But rightfully so, they're also reviving a sport that, by the way, is not new, seems new for this generation, but really is old. Because you got to remember, before there was real mixed martial arts fighting in terms of a sporting competition, in terms of being supported by legitimate sponsorships, there was only boxing. And then before boxing, it was bare knuckle boxing, which is the reality of what this sport is and its origins. Right now only being done in the United Kingdom with BKB, which is the BKFC version of the UK. They've been very big with those shows. They've been big with a lot of the underground shows. And if it wasn't for those underground shows, well, then obviously they had these underground fight clubs where they would hold these particular events. Well, now Conor McGregor is an owner of one of these particular organizations that has this origin, which is BKFC. And quite frankly, you have to understand that it is a leverage that he is trying to pull from the UFC. Because here's the thing, the UFC has not re-signed his contract. At least there have been a lot of rumors circulating that. I can neither confirm nor deny the reality of that, but let's just rest assured that it is leaning way more towards the area of not being re-signed, and I'm going to explain the reasons why. I may have done it, but this is a new video, and you may not have watched the other videos, so I'm going to explain to you again, and don't be offended if I'm repeating another aspect that I've mentioned in previous videos, but understand this. Conor McGregor is done. There is just a point in any athlete's life where a lot of these things happen. And you have to understand when they happen. Right now, he's 35 years old, hasn't been active over those years, and within those years, he's been very wealthy. And not only that, now with putting a stake into the BKFC brand, I think is going to create even further distractions away from his actual fighting training camps and the concentration that is required out of him to compete at these highest levels, especially against someone like Michael Chandler. So now what Conor McGregor has is just a limited time left in this sport, and the UFC knows that. They understand the trajectory of these athletes. They've studied athletes for a very long time, and by the way, if you think that the PI Center is not a center for them to gather data, for them to understand future matchups, or for them to understand future athletes and how they're going to perform, and more importantly, when they're going to break, all of these things are honestly a big part of the bigger picture. And now they're starting to see where his breaking point is at and where his ending point is at, and it could be right now. Sure, he may get by Michael Chandler, but one more fight after that, they're going to give him a very tough matchup. Suppose maybe someone like Islam Makhachev. And by the way, the UFC is not opposed to that idea. They may even throw him in there against Khamzat if Conor McGregor decides to fight at a higher weight class. That's a great possibility. But rest assured, they're going to try to make his exit a very brutal exit. And quite frankly, BKFC has a lot to do with all of these matters at hand. Why? Because if they don't re-sign him in the type of package that Conor McGregor is ultimately looking for, this is what's going to happen. He's going to be with the BKFC. He doesn't even have to sign with them or anything like that. He can just come in there as a guest fighter, compete in whatever capacity, maybe become president, maybe become a matchmaker, whatever he wants to do. Compete, matchmake, promote, all of the above. He has the power to do that. And now that he's gone from the UFC, he can virtually create a rival for the UFC in terms of pay-per-view numbers, not as a rival in MMA, because obviously we're talking about a completely different sport, right? BKFC, bare knuckle boxing, and MMA, two completely different sports. But here's something that is strange that I found out about BKFC, at least in terms of just the overall cultural value that you could sort of appreciate about them. They lean more towards the MMA culture than they do the boxing culture, but their lineage truly comes from the boxing culture. And not to mention, BKFC also allows dirty boxing in which you can clinch somebody up and then uppercut them while you're holding their head, which you cannot do in the Queensberry rules. So to just explain a few mishaps about these particular sports or the differences that people may not be aware of. Here's another thing I wanted to mention about David Feldman, right? So as a promoter, I forgot to mention about his malpractice. He told a bunch of fighters to fight exciting, right? And obviously he doesn't do that anymore because he caught huge flack from it. And as a result, you're not going to see Dave Feldman try to tell fighters how to fight. In the same similar fashion that Gary Shaw, the Elite XC promoter, who owned his own MMA organization that was signed with the Showtime, or yeah, was it Showtime? I believe it was Showtime, but he signed Kimbo in that particular brand as well. And what happened? He brought in this guy, Seth Petrozelli, who, by the way, was told to just stand up with Kimbo so that Kimbo has a chance and that he doesn't get annihilated on the ground. And what happens as a result? Seth Petrozelli ends up knocking out Kimbo because of his sense of urgency to go in there and really knock this guy out. So there you go. That's the reality of this particular instance with Conor McGregor as now the new owner of BKFC. It's a leverage tool because now he can make BKFC a bigger organization than what it had been previously. And why do I say that? Okay, for one, I got to tell you, Conor McGregor is a big name. He could almost be as a bigger name than the UFC. Okay? I don't know if I would go as far as to say he's bigger than the UFC, but it's getting close to that. And if he aligns himself with BKFC, it's a merger that sort of helps each other, right? It helps each other in multiple ways. For one, obviously with Conor, it is all about the contract leverage that he can pull with BKFC. The other side of that is that Conor McGregor can have a place to compete even after his UFC career. Because let's be honest, will Conor step in there in BKFC? A lot of people will say no. Why would a guy who's that rich step in there? Boy, let me tell you, if there's one thing you got to give Conor credit for, it's his gangster. A lot of people really forget about this guy's gangster and how he gets down. You got to remember, this is the guy that said yes to Chad Mendes on the way of losing Aldo through injuries, and knowing that this guy had a bad style against him, which everybody asked, how would he do against a wrestler? In came Chad Mendes to replace him. And then fights Nate Diaz and Eddie Alvarez all within a span of a couple of months. From August to November, he took those fights and then went straight into a Floyd fight. He doesn't say no. He's a savage. And guess what? Just like 50 Cent, this is the type of guy that was doing a lot of dirt when he was coming up in the streets, and when he became a rap star, he wasn't any different. He was still down to get down on the mud and get down in the dirt. Conor McGregor is no different. He comes from a background where, by the way, a lineage that goes back to the bare knuckle boxing days. So he's going to feel right at home if he was to get down on his own business, literally, figuratively, and metaphorically speaking. So don't forget to like and subscribe, as I've given you everything that I can possibly give you on this particular matter at hand of Conor McGregor becoming the new owner of BKFC. And by the way, it's very smart, because there's something you got to understand about business. Business is not about emotions. Business is about knowing that if you collaborated with certain people, that you know what, you're going to do great numbers with them. That is what business is about. And sometimes you're going to have to do it with somebody that you don't like. For example, I'll give you an example. Zain Musa Boxing. It just so happens that I happen to like that guy. He is also a fellow Muslim brother of mine. And guess what? Whenever me and him get on the microphone together, whether it's my channel or his, we do great numbers. Especially for me, being a smaller channel now, in the time that you're watching this video, we do great numbers together. But would I collaborate with somebody that is the opposite of Zain, that maybe somebody that I don't like? 100%. I don't have to like you to do business with you. But that is what it takes to do what it needs to get certain missions done. And Conor McGregor is down to do that in any event. And guess what? Right now, I just don't think that the UFC thinks he's great for business the way that Conor McGregor used to be. And I think we really have to take all of those into consideration. But suppose, well, not suppose, obviously we now know he is a partial owner of BKFC. Does this add on to his brand? I'm going to say yes, it does. You want to know why? Because it's fresh, it's new, and it's something that can compensate in case he goes out on a loss, or in case he has to really leverage himself with contract negotiations with the UFC. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you guys soon. And before I go, let me read off the wins and the losses of this weekend's UFC fight. And by the way, there was a BKFC fight, by the way, which is the reason why this particular video was prompt to be made, because of the response that this weekend had brought with Conor McGregor as the surprise announcement for BKFC just right before their co-main event, or one of their main cards, or something to that extent. So obviously we had UFC fights that night as well. We had Gabriel Benavidez taking on Haishar Machete, wins by a decision. Ivana Petrovic gets a submission win in the third round against Liang Na. James Leontop versus Chris Padilla. Chris Padilla gets a submission in the first round. Marnik Mann versus Caitlin Souza. Caitlin Souza wins by a decision. Dontel Mays wins a decision over Caio Machado. Austin Hubbard wins a decision over Mikhail Figlak. Ryan Yahya, 39 years old, still doing a damn thing out here. Veteran of the game. Gets TKO'd in the third round against Victor Henry. And then on to the main card that night, you had Tim Means. Tim, the Dirty Bird Means, taking on Oris Medjic. And then Oris Medjic gets a first-round knockout. Decision win for David Onama. Austin Lane gets a brutal knockout against Joe Anta Dennis. And Ariane Lipsky versus Karine Silva. Karine Silva gets a decision. Ryan Spann gets knocked out by Bogdan Guskov. And the main event, Alex Perez gets a second-round knockout against Mateus Nikolai. And that was UFC's main card right after the April 13th UFC 300 card. Sorry, been a very long weekend, obviously. BKFC had fight nights. There were a few boxing cards as well with Virgil Ortiz. And obviously we got some boxing coming up. We're obviously going to cover the Canelo versus Jamie Munguia fight. That's going to be a coverage. We're going to cover the Tyson Fury and Usyk fight. There's Lomachenko as well. And obviously June 2nd, as I said, right, the whole entire month of June is going to be MMA, UFC, and the month of May is going to be all boxing. You got Conor McGregor on the 29th of June versus Chandler, and then you got Islam versus Dustin Poirier on June 1st, first of the month. So more on those cards that we're going to cover and new fights that are going to be added on to that. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And I hope that I've given you all the best information, speculations, and the entertainment news and information that you could get regarding Conor McGregor and his new acquisition as the partial owner of BKFC. And by the way, a growing brand at that. Big win for Mike Perry. Big win for Mick Terrell and all the other people that were in the BKFC card. Great night of fights all over the globe, all over BKFC, all over the UFC, and boxing around the world as well. So we'll leave it here. Like and subscribe once again, inshallah, and I will see you in the next video.